Here's something I learned after 3 decades of sitting across from broken people trying to piece themselves back together. The cruelest rejections don't come from strangers. They come from the people whose love you never thought you'd have to earn. And when your own family decides you're the problem, when they look at you and see a threat instead of a person, something inside you fractures in a way that never quite heals the same. I'm going to tell you about a woman I'll call Elena. She came to see me 6 years ago, and I'll never forget the way she sat in that chair, perfectly still, hands folded, like if she moved too suddenly, she might shatter. She was 34 years old, had a good job, a small apartment she kept immaculate, and a family that had uninvited her from her own sister's wedding. Not with a conversation, not with an apology, just with silence, and an envelope that never arrived. This is a story about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you decide you're the thing they need protection from. Elena didn't come to therapy because of the wedding. She came because she couldn't stop washing her hands. 20, 30 times a day. Until they cracked and bled. Until her coworkers started noticing. Until she couldn't hold a coffee cup without pain shooting up her wrists. I know it's irrational, she told me in our first session. I know my hands are clean, but they don't feel clean. We always start with symptoms, but we never end there. The body speaks what the mouth can't say. It took 3 sessions before she mentioned her family. Another 2 before she told me about the wedding. And when she finally said the words out loud, my mom told my sister not to invite me because I'd ruin everything. Her hands started moving toward each other, palms ready to rub together, before she caught herself and pressed them flat against her thighs. The wedding was her younger sister's, Christina. Elena described her as the golden child, though she said it without venom, just as fact. Christina was getting married to her college sweetheart in a vineyard ceremony that cost more than Elena made in 6 months. Their mother had been planning it for a year, calling Elena every few weeks with updates, asking her opinion on flowers and favors and whether the salmon or the chicken would be better. Elena had already bought her bridesmaid dress. Navy blue, fitted, expensive. She'd taken vacation days from work, booked a hotel room. Then, one Sunday afternoon, she was at her parents' house for their weekly family dinner. Just the 4 of them, Elena, Christina, their mother, their father. Same as it had been every Sunday for as long as Elena could remember. Their mother was in the kitchen. Christina was scrolling through her phone. Their father was watching a game with the volume too loud. Elena walked past the dining room table on her way to help with dinner, and that's when she saw them. 3 cream-colored envelopes. Formal. Embossed. The kind you only use for something important. She wouldn't have looked twice, except she recognized Christina's calligraphy on the front. Elena's parents' names on one envelope. Her aunt and uncle's names on another. Her grandmother's name on the third. Wedding invitations. Being hand-delivered at family dinner. Elena stood there, staring at those 3 envelopes, waiting for her mother to come out of the kitchen with a 4th one. Waiting for Christina to look up and say, "Oh, yours is in my car." But her mother came out empty-handed. Christina didn't look up. And Elena realized there was no 4th envelope. She told me she stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. Her mind doing that thing brains do when reality doesn't match expectation, searching for an explanation that makes sense. Maybe her invitation was mailed. Maybe they forgot to print it. Maybe this was a joke. "Did you ask?" I said. "No," Elena said. "I just went home. I told them I wasn't feeling well, and I left." That's the moment. That's the spark. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet erasure. Witnessed by accident, that confirmed something Elena had suspected her whole life but never had proof of. She was the expendable one. Here's what happens in the brain when you experience sudden social rejection, especially from people you love. The same neural pathways light up as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, which processes the distress of breaking a bone or touching fire, responds to emotional exclusion the same way. Your body can't tell the difference between a wound that bleeds and a wound that doesn't. Elena drove home that day and threw up in her kitchen sink. Then she washed her hands and washed them again and again. But she didn't call her mother, didn't call her sister. She waited. 3 days later, her phone finally rang. It was her mother. "Christina asked me to talk to you," her mother said. No greeting, no small talk. About the wedding. Elena's heart jumped. Here it was. The explanation. The apology. "We've decided it's going to be a small ceremony. Very intimate. Just immediate family and Christina's closest friends." "I'm immediate family," Elena said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Silence on the other end. Long enough that Elena thought the call had dropped. Then her mother said, "Christina doesn't want any drama. And you know how you get. How you get." 3 words that carried 34 years of implication. "I don't understand," Elena said. "I haven't done anything." "It's not about what you've done. It's about keeping things peaceful. You're very intense, Elena. You always have been. Christina just wants her day to be perfect, and we think it's better if you sit this one out." Sit this one out. Like it was a game. Like her sister's wedding was a casual event Elena could just catch next time. "So I'm not invited," Elena said. "Don't be dramatic. You can come to the reception. We're doing a casual thing the next day, just family. You'll be there for that. But not the ceremony. Not the moment her little sister became someone's wife. Not the photographs, or the vows, or the first dance." Elena asked the question she already knew the answer to. "Does Christina feel this way, or do you?" Another long silence. "This is a family decision, Elena. I think you should respect it." Then her mother hung up. "Have you ever been told you're too much by the people who are supposed to love you no matter what? Tell me in the comments, because I need you to know you're not alone in this." Elena sat on her couch for 3 hours after that call. Didn't move. Didn't cry. Just sat there, holding her phone, trying to make sense of a decision that had no sense in it. That night, she washed her hands 47 times. She counted. I need you to understand something about family scapegoating, because that's what this was. In dysfunctional family systems, there's often one person designated, consciously or unconsciously, as the repository for everything wrong. Not because they've done something terrible, but because the family needs someone to be the problem so everyone else can feel okay. Elena spent our first month of sessions trying to figure out what she'd done wrong. She went back through years of family gatherings, looking for the moment she'd ruined things, the transgression that would explain why her own mother thought she'd destroy her sister's wedding just by existing there. "There has to be something," she kept saying. "People don't just hate you for no reason." But here's the truth. Sometimes they do. Not hate, exactly, but rejection, exclusion, blame. Sometimes these things have nothing to do with your actual behavior and everything to do with what you represent to people who can't face their own dysfunction. Elena was the eldest. She'd been parentified from age 7, after her father lost his job and her mother sank into what was probably undiagnosed depression. Elena made lunches, helped with homework, kept the house running. She grew up too fast and too responsible, the way eldest daughters often do in chaotic homes. By the time things stabilized, by the time her father got back on his feet and her mother emerged from her fog, Elena had become something uncomfortable, a reminder of hard times. She remembered what everyone else wanted to forget. She'd seen her parents at their worst. She'd been the parentified child who held things together, and now that she wasn't needed for that anymore, she was just inconvenient. Christina, for years younger, barely remembered the bad years. She grew up in the aftermath, when their parents had re-established stability and could be the parents they couldn't be for Elena. She got the healed version of them, the present version, the version that had time and energy for school plays and birthday parties and genuine affection. "I don't resent her for it," Elena told me. "I love my sister. I just don't understand why loving her means I can't be at her wedding." We spent weeks unpacking that question, and slowly a pattern emerged. Elena remembered being 14, asking her mother about therapy because she was having panic attacks at school. Her mother said, "We don't need therapy. We're fine. Don't tell anyone we're not fine." She remembered being 19, home from college, mentioning casually that she'd started seeing someone she'd met in her psychology class. Her mother's face had tightened. You're seeing a therapist? What are you telling them about us? She wasn't seeing a therapist. She'd meant she was dating someone. But her mother's first thought was that Elena was exposing family secrets to strangers. She remembered being 25 at Thanksgiving dinner when her aunt made a passive-aggressive comment about Elena not being married yet. Elena had laughed and said something like, "I'm busy building a career, not collecting husbands." Her mother had pulled her aside after dinner and said, "You embarrassed me. You always have to make things uncomfortable." Pattern after pattern, year after year. Elena existing authentically, mentioning hard truths, setting boundaries, not performing the happy family script, was treated as aggression. "You were the truth teller," I said to her one day. And truth tellers make liars uncomfortable. Her hands went still. She looked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language she was trying to translate. "My family isn't lying," she said slowly. "They're lying about being fine," I said. "They're pretending the past didn't happen, that hard things didn't hurt, that everyone's okay now. And every time you exist in a way that reminds them otherwise, you become the problem." The breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. Elena had decided she wasn't going to the reception either. She wasn't going to show up for the scraps of inclusion her family was willing to offer. She'd written a card for Christina, sent a gift, and made peace with her decision. Then her father called. Her father, who never called. Who stayed quiet during every family conflict. Who'd let his wife make every major decision for 30 years. "Your mother told me you're not coming to the reception," he said. "That's right. This is really hurting her, Elena. She's trying to include you, and you're being stubborn." Something in Elena snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but definitively. "Dad," she said, "I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding. I'm not being stubborn. I'm being excluded, and I'm choosing not to pretend that's okay. Christina has a right to want her day to be peaceful. And I have a right to wonder what about me is so terrible that my presence at her wedding would ruin it." Silence. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "You've always been difficult," he finally said. "Even as a kid. You ask too many questions. You push too hard. Some of us are just trying to get through life without making everything so complicated." That's when Elena understood it wasn't about the wedding. It never had been. It was about a little girl who'd grown up in chaos and learned to survive by being hypervigilant, by noticing what others ignored, by speaking up when something felt wrong. And that little girl had grown into a woman who couldn't pretend things were fine when they weren't. Who couldn't smile through family dinners where no one acknowledged the elephant suffocating everyone at the table. She'd become the scapegoat not because she was difficult, but because telling the truth in a family built on denial is the most difficult thing you can do. "I have to go," Elena said, and hung up before he could respond. She sat on her bathroom floor that night and sobbed until her ribs hurt. Then she washed her hands until the skin split and bled into the sink. That's when she knew she needed help. Not because of the wedding. Because of the 34 years that led to it. Here's what I need you to understand about family trauma. It's not always abuse. Sometimes it's just being unseen over and over until you start to wonder if you're even real. Sometimes it's being loved conditionally, performance-based, until you're so exhausted from trying to be acceptable that you can't remember who you actually are underneath all that striving. Elena's hands were washing away something that couldn't be washed away. The feeling of being dirty, wrong, shameful just by existing. The wedding happened without her. She didn't go to the reception. Her mother sent her exactly one text message. "You've really disappointed us." No one called to check on her. No one asked how she was doing. The message was clear. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. Except she hadn't made a choice. A choice had been made for her, and she'd simply refused to be grateful for it. Recovery from family rejection is a particular kind of grief, because you're not just mourning what you lost. You're mourning what you never had to begin with. Elena spent months in therapy, unraveling the narrative she'd carried her whole life. That if she could just be better, quieter, easier, her family would love her the way she needed to be loved. We had to dig down to a harder truth. They loved her the only way they were capable of loving. And it wasn't enough. It had never been enough. And that wasn't her fault. I keep thinking if I'd just gone to that reception, if I'd swallowed my pride and showed up, maybe things would be okay now, she said one day, about 4 months in. Things weren't okay before, I told her. You were just working harder to pretend they were. That's the insidious thing about being the scapegoat. You become so accustomed to managing everyone else's emotions, to contorting yourself to keep the peace, that you forget you're allowed to have needs too. You forget that love isn't supposed to hurt this much. We worked on something called radical acceptance, not condoning what happened, not excusing it, but accepting that it happened, and that she couldn't change other people, only her response to them. Elena's hands slowly healed, though it took months. Every time she felt the urge to wash them compulsively, we'd trace it back to what she was really trying to cleanse. Shame that wasn't hers to carry. Shame is a poison that seeps into everything when you're told, implicitly or explicitly, that you're too much or not enough. It makes you believe that if people reject you, it must be because there's something fundamentally wrong with you. But here's what I've learned after 30+ years of doing this work. The people who reject you are usually just reflecting back their own unhealed wounds. Your presence reminds them of something they don't want to see in themselves, so they push you away and call it your fault. Elena didn't speak to her family for 8 months after the wedding. Not out of anger, though she had every right to be angry. Out of self-preservation. She needed space to figure out who she was when she wasn't performing for people who would never be satisfied. She started going to a support group for adult children of dysfunctional families. She heard story after story that mirrored her own. The designated problem child who was actually just the only one willing to acknowledge reality. The truth teller punished for not maintaining the illusion. The scapegoat carrying blame that belonged to the whole system. I thought I was alone, she told me after her first meeting. I thought my family was uniquely messed up. But everyone in that room knew exactly what I was talking about. That's the power of shared experience. It breaks the isolation that shame depends on to survive. About a year after the wedding, Christina reached out. A short text, "Can we talk?" Elena called me before she responded. "What do I do? What do you want to do?" I asked. She sat with that question for a while. I want my sister back, but I don't want to pretend nothing happened. So that's what she told Christina. They met for coffee, just the two of them. No mother orchestrating the conversation. No father staying silent while conflict bubbled over. Christina cried. Said she'd been afraid of disappointing their mother. That she knew the wedding decision was wrong, but didn't know how to stand up to their mom. Said she missed Elena. Said she was sorry. It wasn't enough. An apology can't undo a year of exclusion. But it was something. I need you to understand, Elena told her sister, that I can't have a relationship with you if it means accepting that I'm the problem every time Mom decides I am. I love you, but I'm done being the family scapegoat. Christina nodded. Said she understood. Whether she actually did or not, time will tell. Elena and her sister have a relationship now, 2 years later. It's limited, boundaried, not what it was before. But it's honest in a way it never was. They see each other without their parents present. They text about their actual lives, not just pleasantries. It's not perfect, but it's real. Elena hasn't spoken to her mother in over 2 years. Her father sends occasional texts that she rarely responds to. She spent last Christmas with friends instead of family, and she told me it was the first holiday in her life where she didn't feel like she was walking on eggshells. I thought I'd feel guiltier, she said. I thought cutting them off would destroy me. And, I asked, it was the least destructive thing I've ever done. Here's what I want you to take from Elena's story, because I think it matters now more than ever. You are not required to maintain relationships with people who consistently make you feel worthless, even if they're family, even if they gave birth to you, or raised you, or share your blood. Love is not supposed to feel like constantly apologizing for existing. Family is supposed to be the place where you can be yourself without fear. When it becomes the place where you have to perform, pretend, and diminish yourself just to be tolerated, it's not serving the purpose it's supposed to serve. And here's the harder truth. Some families can't be fixed. Some patterns are too entrenched, some people too resistant to change, some dynamics too toxic to survive in. You can love people from a distance. You can grieve what you wish you had while accepting what actually is. You can honor yourself by walking away from situations that require you to dishonor yourself to stay. I know that's painful to hear, especially if you're in it right now. I know how badly you want your family to wake up and see you really see you, and apologize for all the ways they've made you feel invisible or burdensome. But you can't wait for their awakening to start your own healing. You can't make yourself smaller, hoping they'll finally have room for you. You can't earn love that should have been given freely from the beginning. The washing of Elena's hands was her body's way of trying to wash away a contamination that didn't exist. She wasn't dirty. She wasn't shameful. She wasn't too much. She was just honest in a system that required dishonesty to function, and that made her dangerous to people who desperately needed to maintain the lie. If you're the black sheep in your family, if you're the one always blamed for ruining things just by having feelings or needs or boundaries, I want you to hear this. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not too sensitive. You're not too difficult. You're not too much. You're just too honest for people who've built their lives on pretending. And that's not a flaw. That's integrity. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if this story resonates with you, tell me why. Because I think a lot of people need to hear that they're not crazy for feeling hurt when their own family treats them like a problem instead of a person. Elena still has hard days. She still sometimes wonders if she made the right choice, if maybe she should have tried harder, been more forgiving, given more chances. That doubt probably never fully goes away when you've been conditioned your whole life to believe you're the problem. But then she looks at her hands, scarred but healed, and she remembers what it cost her to stay in a family that required her silence. And she knows, deep in the part of herself that's finally learning to trust her own knowing, that she made the only choice that allowed her to survive. You deserve people in your life who don't make you feel like you're ruining everything just by being yourself. You deserve to be invited, included, celebrated. And if your family can't give you that, you're allowed to build a new family from the people who can. Blood doesn't obligate you to accept mistreatment. Shared DNA doesn't mean shared values. And walking away from people who hurt you isn't cruel, it's self-preservation. The breaking point isn't when your family rejects you. The breaking point is when you finally stop rejecting yourself to make them comfortable. Elena reached that point. It took 34 years and a wedding invitation that never came, but she got there. And if you're still waiting for yours to arrive, still hoping they'll see you, still trying to prove you're worthy of basic inclusion, I want you to know that you don't need their invitation to start living a life that honors who you actually are. You can invite yourself to your own life. You can show up for yourself in all the ways they never did. And that might not heal the wound of their rejection, but it will give you something they never could. The solid ground of knowing you didn't abandon yourself to keep them. That's the lesson. That's what Elena taught me, and what I hope she's taught you. You are not too much. You were just in a space too small to hold you. And it's time to find a bigger space.